Chalnath dispatches. And Cunning. Grimsnick peered through the tangled ruins.
Over blast-tumbled walls and between heaped drifts of soot and ash, his view is magnified by the spotting gizmo given to him by Big Mech Nugzot. The gizmo is bulky, but its looking gubbin's a handheld unit linked by thick cables to the blocky transmitter strapped to the side of his backpack. But Grimsnick is a big tough commando knob. Even if the spotting gizmo was annoyingly heavy, the blood axe would never let on in front of his lads. Besides, Nuzgot clearly knows his know-whats. The device is proving extremely useful. Right now, its glowing marker glyphs are helping Grimsnick pick out the 3 Umi soldiers patrolling the ruins. They look to be following a route back and forth along the base of the very ridge that Grimsnick and his mob need to get on top of. There's a half-collapsed tower up there that will serve as the vantage point they need, but as much as it chafes at Grimsnick's fundamental orkiness, they've got to do it without a lot of dakka and din. Grimsnick turns and sweeps his gimlet stare across his assembled lads. The mob is gathered around him in the hollow shell of some old Umi building. Crouched amongst them is a oil-smeared death skull mech called Boggs. He's one of Nuzgot's favourites. Strapped to his back is a contraption big and heavy enough to put Grimsnick's spotting gizmo to shame. It's not been made clear to Grimsnick exactly why Boggs is here, or what his device will do, only that it's the blood axe's job to get the mech boy to a suitable vantage point. Then protect him, while he does whatever it is Big Mech Nuzgot expects of him. Conscious of the Umi sentries patrolling nearby, Grimsnick employs the complex and extremely sneaky, in his opinion, non-verbal code he has developed with his mob for such situations. First, he points one thick taloned finger in the rough direction of each sentry. Next, he makes a firm chopping motion to divide his mob roughly in 3. After putting his finger to his lips and giving the lads another ferocious scowl, largely aimed towards Uznog, who is cradling his prized rocket launcher and looking hopeful, Grimsnick finishes his briefing with a violently exaggerated throat-slitting motion. Moments later, Grimsnick's mob are on the move. They slink through the ruins with exemplary blood axe cunning, barely making a sound despite the gear that festoons them and the brawny bulk of their physics. Grimsnick has Uznog in his group. They're better to keep an eye on the trigger-happy git, and also Mechboy Boggs, lumbering along beneath his mechanical burden. Hanging back a little to avoid either Orks causing problems, Grimsnick is thus treated to the sight of the 2 other groups of commandos, reaching their prey ahead of him. On the left flank, Shifty, the mob's grot, pops his head up from behind a crumbling wall, then ducks swiftly back. The motion is just enough to catch one sentry's eye. Yumi frowns and turns towards Shifty's position. In the same instant, Big Grog looms up behind the distracted sentry, wraps one thick arm around his face, and all but saws their head off with a single drag of his knife across their throat. Grimsnick picks up the pace, loping through the ruins as he hears stones skittering over the right flank. Slasher Lug has dropped onto his chosen sentry from a first-floor window, but the Umi must have been quicker than Lug was expecting. Through a gap in the ruins, Grimsnick catches a glimpse of the 2 of them struggling. The fight is resolved as Zogdak slips up behind the second Umi and slams the butt of his big shooter into the sentry's skull. Regardless, the scuffle has caused enough noise that the last sentry, Grimsnick's own target, is clearly suspicious. They turn towards the sound, fumbling with some manner of communication gubbins in their belt. Now or never, thinks Grimsnick. He unhooks a heavy-bladed hatchet from his belt and accelerates into a run. With a well-practiced motion, the commando knob lobs the weapon over arm and sends it whipping end over end through the air. The blade hits the Umi in the side of the head with a meaty thonk and drops him like a sack of squig dung. Grimsnake advances up the slope to the ridgetop with his mob. They scramble through more ruined structures, most of which look to have been brought down by shockwaves, or maybe even earthquakes, rather than any kind of dacker. Leaving most of his commandos dug in below, Grimsnake leads Zogdak and Mechboy Boggs up the crumbling stairs of the tower to its third story. There, ignoring the alarming creaking and swaying of the structure, Grimsnake and Zogdak drop in behind the scant cover of the tower's slighted walls, while Boggs busies himself with his contraption. Raising the spot and gizmo again, Grimsnake stares out towards the Umi city, now visible in the middle distance. He can't help being impressed. It's a big place with high walls and lots of defences. There are numerous industrial structures belching smog or pillars of flame into the soot-wreathed skies too. To Grimsnake's disappointment, it's on account of these that he finds his view of the Umi's infamous super-weapon obscured. He gets a sense of something absolutely colossal amidst the smog. Can't hide something the size of a mountain after all, but he can't quite. Zogdak catches his attention with a thump on the arm and points with the barrel of his scoped big shooter. Grimsnake follows the gesture and finds himself looking at the squat Umi fortress that lies between his current position and the distant city walls. Crouched in the shadow of the structure is what Grimsnake quickly recognises as a Umi maglev station. The fort itself looks to have suffered as much as the ruins around him, though it shows signs of having been repeatedly shored up in an effort to keep it standing. Grimsnake is fairly certain it wouldn't stand up to a determined attack by the right lads, and that would leave the railhead undefended. Following the tracks with his gaze, the commando Nob sees where they dip through a fortified tunnel in the city walls. That's the way in, he thinks. It is at this point that a rising whir and a static crackle announce the mech-boy's success. Grimsnake wheels around to tell the daft git to be quiet. He finds himself face to face with a static-laced, grot-sized facsimile of Big Mech Nuzgot, fashioned from glowy green energy. Haunting the fringes of the projection are more figures. Grimsnake can make out Snakebite Big Boss Ripper peering at him mistrustfully, and the massive form of Goth Boss Gargdragger looming over Nuzgot. The commando can't resist a glance skywards. Somewhere up in the void above Volcus, he guesses Nuzgot and his bosses must be clustered around an equally grainy green projection of Grimsnake himself. "Well?" demands Nuzgot, his voice crackling slightly out of sync with his mouth movements. "You found a way in yet, Grimsnake?" "Don't need a way in," rumbles Goth Boss Gardragger before Grimsnake can reply. "Don't need that sneaky blood axe git to find us one. Guess he's all just mucking about. Me and the lads can bash down the Umi city's walls and stomp 'em. You can try, and the Umi super weapon will dacker yous up good before you get anywhere to city," replies Nuzgot dismissively. "We've been all over this. We gotta be sneaky, or we won't get a scrap at all." Nuzgot swats away Big Boss Ripper's hand. The snakebite had started poking the hollow projection of Grimsnake in suspicious displeasure, then tries again. "Go on, Grimsnake. What you got?" "I reckon we found a sneaky way into the Umi city, and a good spot for some of Gargdragger's lads to kick some teeth in," Grimsnake replies. "Been recording it all with your spot and gizmo. I'll send it up in a mo." "Good work, Grimsnake, you shifty git," beams Nuzgot. "Before you knows it, lads, we'll be stomping dem Umis flat down there, and then all dat loot." Even rendered in grainy green light, the avaricious leer on the Big Mech's face is obvious. "What about the mega loot?" Nuzgot demands, as Grimsnake knew he would. "You got me a good look-see at it." "Still a long way off, boss," hitches Grimsnake. "And there's a lot of smoke and smog in the way." "Zog me, Grimsnake, it's the size of a zogging pile of gargants," exclaims Gargdragger. "How can you not see it?" Gritting his teeth, Grimsnake turns back to gesture at the rolling banks of smog obscuring his view. Yeah, just at that moment, some whirling air currents drag the atmospheric pollutants apart like a curtain drawing back. Suddenly, there's the super weapon, colossal, almost godlike in its proportions, towering over the city. Something deep down in Grimshnick cannot help but respond to such unbelievable destructive potential. In that moment, he feels the closest his indomitable orc psyche will ever get to real awe. "Got your look-see, boss," he says, raising the spotting gizmo to his face again. "And zog me, you was right. We gotta loot that."